Alright, in this video, I want to talk about paradise. But before I do, there's three passages that I would like to actually bring up. Isaiah 34:16, seek ye out the book of the Lord and read, so that we don't hear this from Jesus, from Matthew 22:29, ye do err, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. Because when you know the scriptures, you know God. And what does John tell us in his gospel? Well, in chapter 17, at verse 3, he says, and this is life eternal, that they might know thee, the one true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. This knowing is a deep knowing, like Adam knew Eve, and she conceived. It's a deep, intimate, sexual knowing that would lead to a new birth. But anyway, let's get into this video about paradise. You actually won't find paradise mentioned all that often in the scriptures, but it's actually a reference to Eden, or also known as Abraham's bosom. In Revelation chapter 2 at verse 7 it says, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. Now, here we see where the tree of life is. It's in the midst, or the middle of the paradise of God. And this is in Revelation, the end. Well, we're told the same thing in the actual beginning. In Genesis chapter 2 at verse 9 it says, and out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight, and good for food. The tree of life also was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So in Eden is the tree of life. Eden is paradise. But there's something interesting you need to know about what happened to the Garden of Eden. In Ezekiel 31, verses 16 through 18, we read about something interesting that happened to the Garden of Eden. It says here in verse 16, I made the nations to shake at the sound of his fall, when I cast him down to hell with them that descend into the pit, and all the trees of Eden. All the trees of Eden went down to hell, to a pit? The choice and best of Lebanon, all that drink water shall be comforted in the nether parts of the earth. They also went down into hell with him unto them that be slain with the sword, and they that were his arm, that dwell under his shadow in the midst of the heaven, of the heathen. To whom art thou thus like in glory and in greatness among the trees of Eden? Yet shalt thou be brought down with the trees of Eden unto the nether parts of the earth. So we see here that Eden, at least the trees of them, were brought down to the nether parts of the earth, to hell. It's kind of weird, right? This is known as Abraham's bosom, where you can also read, I wish I remembered this one off the top of my head, where Samuel was raised from the dead. Oh, why have you this? Okay, let's go to this one here. I was going to say disquieted, because I think that's what the King James says. So 1 Samuel 28:15. Of course, we're going to go to the good old King James. Samuel, for context, is dead. And you can see here that Samuel says to Saul, why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? Because Saul went to a soothsayer, someone with a familiar spirit, to talk to the dead. And we see here that Samuel said, right? It doesn't say the Spirit pretending to be Samuel, just for those who think that's what's going on. No, it says Samuel said. It was Samuel. He's like, why did you disquiet me and bring me up? Right? So Samuel was where? He was actually in paradise, in Eden, in hell. Because see, at this time, before the cross, that's where paradise was. So when we read here in Luke chapter 23, at verse 43, Jesus is talking to one of the thieves on the cross. He says, verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. So Jesus is telling this thief that today we're both going to die, and you'll be with me in paradise, which is Eden, which is in the nether parts of the earth, which is down, not up, down, right? So when we read Luke chapter 16, we get to see what it's like down there a little bit, at least at this time, before hell enlarged itself. In Luke chapter 16, I know this tries to say that it's a parable, but this is not a parable. All parables are explained. This one doesn't need an explanation because it means what it says and says what it means. It's not a parable. No parable actually uses people's names. Lazarus represents Lazarus. Abraham represents Abraham. Hell represents hell. Moses and the prophets represent Moses and the prophets. There's no metaphor here, no analogy. Everything means what it means, right? And we can see that there's a great gulf between Abraham's bosom. They call it Abraham's bosom because Abraham's waiting in paradise, and everybody who comes, he ends up giving a big hug. So they ended up calling it Abraham's bosom. And the rich man, he doesn't have a name because, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, you have to know God and God has to know you. God doesn't know this guy, so he just calls him rich man. The people in paradise, he's like, yeah, this is Abraham, this is Lazarus. He knows everybody, right? But these other ones, it's like, who are you? That's got to be something, right? If God tells you, the God who's omnipresent and knows everything is like, who are you? I mean, that's saying something, right? But we see that there's a great gulf between this Eden place and this place of torment, where it's a flame of fire, right? So when Jesus gives up the ghost, we read about what he did. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 8, it says, wherefore he saith, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. So when he ascended, he led captivity captive. What's going on there? Well, we'll find out. Verse 9, it says, now that he ascended, what is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? Right? He went to the lower parts of the earth when he died, into hell, where there's paradise and the place of burning. He that descended is the same also that ascended up far above all heavens, that he might fill all things. So you see, Jesus shows why God is great, because God was willing to go to the lowest of lows, humble himself to such a point where he's exalted to the highest point. Like a tree can only grow as tall as its roots go down. Right? But anyway, so we see there that Jesus went to paradise, also known as Abraham's bosom, with that thief on the cross. And that's where Eden was. That's where the tree of life was. And Jesus is that tree of life. So we see this also from Peter, who says the same thing in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 18. It says, for Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit, so made alive by the Spirit. So even though he was dead in the flesh, he was still alive. He went down into the depths of hell, the nether parts of the earth, where Eden is, paradise. Verse 19, by which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison. So you see that he's led captivity captive. Hold on a second here. Just did the editing of that video there. But anyway, so we see what he did there. The captives were those in paradise. Because since Adam and Eve, they ruled over Eden, they gave authority over to Satan, so that was Satan's place. He took it and had it captive, and all the people that were God's people were captive there. Jesus went and paid the price and redeemed them and redeemed all of us. And then he brings paradise up so that when we read about Paul tells a story about paradise, and he says about being caught up to paradise, because right here, when Jesus ascended, he brought paradise or Eden up. Or read about a great earthquake that happened when he raised from the dead, and that people raised from the dead after that. He led captivity captive. He brought paradise up, Eden up, and set it free. Right? Kind of like the earth giving birth. Right? So we also see this, that paradise was also in the earth, not in heaven at the time. As we read in John chapter 20, after Jesus rose from the dead, and a couple of the women wanted to come and talk to him, of course, touch him. But at verse 17, Jesus saith unto her, touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I ascend unto my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God. So you see that? He hasn't ascended yet, because he first went to hell. He's back up on the earth. He talks to them, tells them that he's raised from the dead. He has to first go to the Father, and then he comes back. Because then afterwards they are able to touch him, as he talks to Thomas and says, hey, look, touch the holes in my hands here, the hole in my side, and know. But blessed are those that haven't seen yet believed, right? So after he ascended, then he was allowed to be touched. I imagine it has something to do with cleansing. The high priest going into the temple had to be pure, and then afterwards, after he did what he had to do, then he could actually come among the people, right? So, with that being said, that's a quick teaching on paradise. And what paradise is: Eden, that was brought to the nether parts of the earth, into the earth, next to hell, or in a sense in hell. And that's why we read about hell enlarging itself, because Eden was taken up, or paradise, Abraham's bosom, whatever you want to call it, the captives of Satan, were brought up at that great earthquake, and then hell enlarged itself. So now there's all that captivity there is for the damned. It's not for any of us. That's why Paul tells us that when we die, we're present with the Lord. Right? So, with that being said, hope you enjoyed the teaching. You learned from it. You study this. Think about it. Pray about it. Thanks for watching. Take care.
So that fella couldn't join the church. He couldn't join the church. He couldn't get baptized. He couldn't get baptized. He woke up with God. He woke up with the devil. Are you saved?
Amen.
So that fella didn't take the sacraments, didn't take the sacraments. Didn't say the rosary, didn't say the rosary. Didn't tithe, didn't tithe. He went to heaven, he went to hell. You saved? Didn't keep the law, he didn't keep the law. He broke the commandments, he broke the commandments. He didn't keep the golden rule, he didn't keep the golden rule. He woke up in glory, he woke up in the pit. Are you saved? You're saved. If you're not saved, you're over here or you're over here. You sure ain't in the middle. He said, Lord, remember me, thou comest thy kingdom. And Jesus turned to him and said, verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be saved. Just like that. You have been saved? If you ever saved, you were saved like that.